Over at EFRAG, Richard Lewis has published a report which leaks an email announcing a team union has been formed in Counter-Strike and Dota 2. And the email seems to be led by Zero Gravity, the owner or CEO, whatever it is, of the Navi, who's a team that have a long history in both games. And it sets forth the terms, the demands, the negotiation points for this union, and gives a list of some of the people who are involved in the union. And so this is quite an interesting topic to discuss, because people have been discussing for the last few months the concept of player unions and whether they're necessary and what function they should serve and how they should be structured. But a lot of people haven't stopped to think about the concept of team unions. So here's the first thing to state, is that some people seemed even confused, thinking that this was a player union because they saw the teams and they think, well, the teams are made up of the players. This is nothing to do with a player union. A player union will not only be totally different, but in many senses act directly against this group, this unit, this union, and argue with it. And the middle ground that they reach will be what we end up with in esports in the next few years. So that's the key thing to understand here, is that the team union is exactly what it says in the name. It's a union just for the teams. And the team, you have to always think of the team in this context not as being the players. The players are not part of this team. The team is the owners and the managers and the CEOs and these sorts of people who manage their brand. The players are a totally different entity of their own interests, even their own individual interests, separate from teammates that they might have in terms of salary they want to get, or their position in the team, or how they want something differently done. So the key thing to understand is this team union is to serve the interests of the teams. Now, essentially, that's the simplest way to think of it. Teams deciding things which benefit them. Now, possible they could also benefit organizers, possible they could also benefit players, but that's a secondary concern, and in many cases won't actually be in line with the main goal, which is to get things that interest the team themselves, things that benefit them. Now, the reason why this is an obvious concern immediately, why it'll raise some alarm bells to anyone who's studied history or business in general, or even knows a little bit about esports history, is that as soon as teams unionize, they have goals which are very different to organizers, and they might set unreasonable demands on organizers and make things very difficult there. And likewise, they might set unreasonable demands on players and do things there that they're pushing too hard there. Because the key thing about unions, this is why they're needed, is because if we're being realistic, unions will always form. And what you have to think about unions as is every time a union forms in any level, so say organizers all made a union, well, now you need a union of the teams to be able to battle the organizers so that they don't just make a cartel themselves and lock you out and make you do certain things that you don't want to do there. But then once you have a union of all the teams, now you need a union of the players. So the unions are like a meta game within themselves. So just as if in CSGO, a team gets an amazing AWPer and they're dominating in a certain way, and then another team gets an amazing AWPer. Suddenly now you might, depending on the team that you have in the game, you might need an amazing AWPer now to combat that and to be able to beat that, or you might have to find a counter to that. And so the countervailing force, the counterbalancing force to an organizational union or a team union is to have a player union. So that now it's not just these ones who are organized and therefore have more collective power to battle you, because if you don't do things for one person, then they can just say, right, well, all my other people who are in my union are going to fuck you over as well, or not allow you to do this, or they're going to force you to. You need to have all the players on your side. If you're all the players, and if you're teams, you have to have all the teams together. Otherwise, the players can make ridiculous demands and use their leverage against you, because by banding together, that's how they're going to try and use their leverage. It's the concept of strength in numbers. This is actually where the concept of fascism comes from. For people who are younger and they don't know, the fascist symbol, the fasci, is a bundle of sticks, usually with like a little like a blade on the top. And the concept is that one stick on its own, you could just break it easily, couldn't you? If you bundle them all together, that's going to be incredible. No one could snap like 15 of them and there'll be this incredibly dominant force. But the problem is, who wields the band of sticks? That's the question. It's always set up as a democracy, right? This is going to benefit everyone within it. But what you have to realize is, first of all, eventually people who are the head people up in and most important within these unions will take over, and they'll be the one who wields the power of the union. Even people who individually might not want to do that are forced to by being part of the union, part of the fasci, bound together by one notion. And also, more importantly, the reason they can do that isn't just their own power, but the fact that everyone is banded together means that you can make other people act against their own interests, sometimes within the union, against the members who are dissenting or would want to go otherwise. And that's a way where if you're the controlling party, now you have control over everyone to a degree. So even internally there are political concerns, and there will be a level of intrigue to how it plays out, the power balance within these unions, which isn't necessarily set, because when they're formed it's always like, we're all going to be equal and I'm just going to speak it for the union for now and I'm going to be the chairman or whatever. But You see a lot of these things going on. That's why within big unions, like for example, KESPA over in South Korea, which is the one they have for all the esports stuff there, when you have these different unions, that's why part of the political battle within the union itself is to elect who will be the chairman for this year, who will do this over here. And then that power struggle determines the policies that go forwards. And so that itself becomes a battle. Now then, one of the concerns when you have these sorts of unions, though, is that if it's a team union or org union, then they might do what happened almost this year, which is set up an exclusivity league. What if some of the teams get together and go to some organizers and say, listen, let's make an exclusive league, or rather, it'd probably be the other way around, actually. The organizer would come to the team union and go like, listen, what are your terms? What would you need for us to have an exclusive league? How much salary would you need? Well, not salary. How much prize money would you need? What considerations would you need in terms of travel expenses? What would you need me to set up and give to you that other people aren't at the moment, and that's going beyond the pale of what other people who in the open circuit do, for me to make an exclusive league where you sign to my league and you don't play in other leagues? We almost saw that with ESL earlier this year, as the reports from Richard Lewis showed. This is what the kind of thing that can happen with team unions, when there's no player union to counterbalance it, no org union. Now, that's a trend in general, that they'll just work for their own benefit. But also, you have to understand that a lot of these people have that mentality, which is actually always assigned. It's kind of like it's always suggested, fuck me, these alarms. It's always suggested that this is something that was said by Genghis Khan, but apparently that's like historically probably not the case. It's just being assigned to him. But it's a great quote, and it fits with what you think of as that guy's mentality, which is the idea that it's not enough that I succeed, others must fail. So as though part of your success is others failing, whereas that's not necessarily always the case. It's not always a zero-sum game. You can succeed, someone else can succeed a little bit. You can succeed, help them succeed a little bit. It might make you succeed even more. These people don't think that way. So part of why they want unions is not just to benefit themselves, which is the primary concern, but a secondary concern that is definitely present and they will use is once they make their union and they're succeeding, they will think to themselves, to make all the resources go towards us and make us have a higher place in the pecking order, we have to fuck over other people. We have to lock, because they're not in our union, we have to lock them out of leagues. We have to get them out of these situations. We have to make deals within our union so that we get certain benefits for being in the union to make sure that people stay out of fear. And we have to make sure people not in our union are punished for not being in our union. And we use our collective might, that fascistic concept, to battle them and to push back them and to repress them. That is what will happen. And so that's why, even within the union itself, there's almost like a threat of inherent violence, whether it's financial or political. Now, the thing with team unions, as I've already referenced, is team unions necessitate player unions, because here's the things that team unions can do. They can set up cartels on salary capping. So as in, what happens is all the teams could get together. Let's say not every team, because they're going to have some lesser teams. But let's say all the tier 1 teams in CSGO got together and said, listen guys, at the moment, we all have the best teams, right? But if this guy over here in the union offers $4,000 a month, then my players for $3,000 are going to leave. But you know what? If this other guy over here, a second guy, offers $4,200, then another team's players might leave. And you know what? If this third guy offers $4,500, the original people that we talked about leaving might then go a year after that over here and get bought out. And so what's going to happen is, listen guys, yeah, we'll all be doing deals ourselves to get the best teams, but what we're doing is we're just fucking each other, guys. Because if we were all to set like a hard cap, like tier 1 teams only make $3,500, it's more, but you know, we're going to make it that, then we all get to have really good teams, but we're not all just having, essentially, we're not all just doing musical chairs, shifting our teams between each other, the lineups, while paying way more money than we need to, because we don't need to, you know, we could just do that and have the salary cap in that sense. That's a thing that for players, you need a pushback on then. Players want certain rights, the ability to bargain against and with other teams and get more salary, and the ability to leverage their own ability if they're a star player to get more money than a certain player. These sorts of issues are totally counter to what's good for the player. Likewise, buyout agreements. What if they say, right, within our organization, we're going to have massive buyouts. We're all going to agree, right? No one's going to have small buyouts. That no other teams can just get players. We're going to make our buyouts. If it's someone outside of the union, we're going to make it $200,000 per player. Impossible almost to pay, right? What if they go the other way? What if part of being the union is like, you know what, within our union, buyouts are low, but the price for anyone not in our union is a massive premium. So if you're within my union, you can buy my players for $25,000. Like, obviously I don't want them to go that, but I'll give people within my union who are acting in my interest and helping me get $25,000 buyout. Anyone who's not in my union, $150,000. You can already see how that's now affecting where the player can even go. The player himself might get offers from teams outside, but since it's going to cost them so much more, the team within the union can offer him more money because they've got more themselves saved by not having to pay the buyout. Therefore, the player himself might not know it until he comes to the negotiation table, but his career has already been severely limited by the restrictions placed on him by the team union in that concept. There's also the fact that league status, such as exclusivity leagues, or just league status where unions have done deals with leagues, could lock players into certain teams. So you're in the top team and you're playing well and you get an offer from another team, but you know what? They're not in the union, so they don't get to play in this biggest league that you want to play in, and you've got all your fans in and you've even moved to that part of the world. Well, now what are you going to do? You're just going to up sticks and go into that team, or you're going to go to another team within the union where they're like, if you come to another team, you stay within the league, you keep your fans, keep your vice versa, you get all this money, etc. These are big issues, right? These are concerns to be thinking about. So, in general, teams are just going to act in their interest, not in the interest of the players. Now, sometimes they'll act in the interest of the players, but that'll be deceptive because they act in the interest in the players in general when that interest meets and matches their own interest. It's like I always say that I don't mind if someone seems like quite ruthless in how they behave or they seem very selfish, because when that happens, I have something I can rely on and predict. I can predict that that person will act at the very minimum in their own self-interest. So now if I arrange my interactions with them, my relationship, my business negotiations with them, so that what benefits them benefits me, that those two line up, then there's a good chance they're going to do what I need them to do, and that will help me as well. That's why people who are psychopaths and certain types of people like that can be very worrying, because you can get some people like that who are unstable, where once you realize that sometimes they'll fuck over themselves for no reason, just to fuck everyone, then you get concerned because it's like, well, now I can't predict this person. This person's off the reservation completely. In terms of team unions, think of this great concept. And this, by the way, this concept applies to organization unions as well. But this is about team unions because that's the email that came out. But basically, think of it as a hierarchy, because you've got the organizations up here, teams down here, and players down here. And so the key thing is, every time you have a union up here, you need one below to help the people who are down there. Otherwise, they're just going to get fucked by the one above that has power over them to a degree. There's a great quote that people have probably nearly always heard the first part of, but the second part's a key part as well. It's a Benjamin Franklin quote that says, democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. Now, everyone's heard that part, and we can understand the principle there. Democracy is like saying, everyone will have an equal vote, except that the two wolves, obviously wolves eat lambs, not other wolves in theory, therefore their vote is obviously going to be, let's fuck up the lamb. And the lamb, it doesn't matter if the lamb goes like, shit, I vote not to eat lambs. It doesn't matter, does it? He's wrecked. So, in this scenario, you need to go to the second part of the quote, which is, liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. Now, within this world, he's made it so the lamb has like a gun or a knife or something, so it can battle the wolves, or at the very least keep them at bay a little bit, or make them think twice about it. It's kind of like that, but I guess to expand the metaphor, it's more like, what if you had two wolves who agreed on this, but then you had 10 lambs, and the 10 lambs all agreed that we will at least fight against this and we will be one united front. Now, listen, two wolves could still kill the lambs, but 10 of them together, and then if they had weapons, I don't know why weapons are involved, but whatever. Nice sci-fi work there, Franklin. But if they were obviously involved, then we can see how that would allow, at least the wolves would have to think about it a bit more. They couldn't just willy-nilly go in there, and they'd have to really consider how to do this. Or in this world, perhaps they'd trade. Give us one lamb every now and then, and we'll leave the others safe. That's the sort of thing I'm talking about. So we'll go through a few of the details in this particular email, and I'll give you a few thoughts on it, because actually some of it makes sense, some of it's unreasonable, and here's kind of the outcomes it'll have on the scene. So first of all, the list of teams were a lot of the ones you expect. Na'vi, Team Liquid, CLG, Cloud9, Virtus.pro, TSM, Fnatic, NiP, Titan, Envious. Now in CSGO, that's fine. They're nearly all the best teams. Now, there's no Dignitas, I noticed, no Hellraisers, no Gamers 2, and no Mouse, who are all teams who are around there. But in CSGO terms, you've basically got all the best teams there. So I understand that that's a pretty good union. Now, I'm not sure in terms of Dota 2 stuff, because it has Dota 2 speculation stuff set out later on, and yet it doesn't have, like, Evil Geniuses. It doesn't have all the teams, it doesn't have Secret, it doesn't have all the teams from China, etc. So that's making me wonder what's going on in that respect. We'll just address the CSGO concerns right now. Now, in terms of CSGO, they say that they won't play any online tournaments that don't have LAN finals. I actually think that's entirely reasonable. There's now, at this point in time, too many LANs. I always say this, okay, I've skipped a bunch of LANs in the summer. I've turned down a bunch of LANs, and yet I've already done something like, I think it was 18 LANs this year, myself as an analyst. And by the end of the year, I'll have done something like 20. So that's probably too many LANs, if we're being honest. To me, the thing about doing this, where they're saying they'll skip all online tournaments, is you free up that space of time. You're not playing every day like some of these people are. You concentrate mainly on the LANs or online tournaments that lead into a LAN. So you have to play it, necessitated to play it to get to the LAN final. Then, even those online tournaments have to have... Oh no, US teams will play some online tournaments, but only in as much as they don't have as many LAN tournaments. And even then, it has to have a certain amount of prize money set, which I think is all fairly reasonable. Then you go to the minimum prize money for CSGO for a LAN is $75,000 purse, and that's not counting the travel support. Now, that's huge because there's a number of tournaments right now that don't have that much money. Think of some of the DreamHacks that probably don't have $75,000 purse. So it's going to cut out a lot of these tournaments. Now, in a way, as an observer, as a spectator, I can be selfish and say, right, well, I don't mind that, because what happens for me is, as a spectator, someone who likes to watch the game, that means that instead of having 6 spots that are all spread out and the prize money is lower, so some teams are 10 and some teams take the event off, maybe instead of having 6 tournaments within a DreamHack type circuit, maybe there'll be 3, maybe there'll be 4. But instead of them being 6, there'll be 3 or 4 with a higher prize purse. More teams will go to it. We'll get more good teams at the one tournament at a time. I can watch that. I don't have to go to as many LANs. Now, you could ask the concern, like, will I make as much money if it's not many LANs and options? Maybe I will, because maybe now there's more scarcity, and if I'm a top quality name talent, maybe I can ask for more, and there's less people to compete. Who knows with that sort of thing? I think mainly as a spectator. I think in a way, I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, it's unfortunate it's going to fuck over some of the less people. Then again, though, that's for this union. Remember, tier 2 teams, like some of the teams I mentioned, if they're not in the union, they can go and compete in these leagues. And hey, maybe they win a smaller league and we watch that league because there's only less LANs now. The ecosystem can work itself out in that respect, depending on how malevolent the actions of the orgs and the teams are later on in this union. They say that they want full travel support, and then they go into all the terms like how much travel support they should get, etc. I don't necessarily mind that. Like, listen, they can go and demand it, and if people pay it, okay, I understand. I have always thought it's a little bit kind of fucked that, like, you're the team. Like, at the end of the day, what is your job, if anything? Like, at this point in time, you should just stop calling yourself an organization, call yourself an agency, for like a talent agent for the players, and they represent you and you get them all this shit. Except you're not quite, because you gotta fuck them over as well. But the traditional thing a team does is provide the travel support, etc. That's the thing they do. Now, okay, I don't really have a problem with them asking for your team orgs events to do it, because one thing I think people miss is that at the end of the day, like I said, there's so many events, right? And they're all competing, wanting teams to come to their event. Therefore, by adding in this travel support, that's a way that they can get not only teams they want there, but better teams there. And they can get their event to be the one that does have the top 8 teams instead of just 1 or 2, and these issues in that sense. Or people who are more local to them. So it's a way, at the end of the day, here's the thing. The teams can choose many LANs to go to. The orgs who run the tournaments have to have top teams to make their LAN a success. So that's where the leverage is, and that's why they're able to make these demands over prize money now. Then you go to the fact that there's this weird part in the email about sort of teams essentially saying like what they'll give to the orgs that they're working with, which is like media reports. Like, they'll put news on their website and they'll do social media posts and they'll embed the tournament stream in their website and all that. The problem with a lot of that stuff is, first of all, they listed way too much stuff there. I'm almost certain most of the teams in this league won't do the majority of that stuff for every single event they go to. I think that's very unreasonable to suggest they will do that. Listen, by the way, I've worked at multiple teams within esports, so I know that would be a massive workload and very likely won't be done. Secondly, I think some of these teams are massively overrating the reach and exposure of their website. We live in a Reddit era now, mate. No one goes to some of these team websites, and no one's going to go just for the news announcing the tournament, because apparently everyone's going to be doing that on their website, and no one's going to go anyway because we're going to get it on a main website from the organizer themselves or from something like Wikipedia or something. So I think they've massively exaggerated the impact that their media reach has. Now, it helps in terms of social media. That will be good, because some of these teams do have a massive social media reach. So that part's pretty good, but I think they're overselling that part of their deal here, the media exposure they have. Then there's the fact that they want transportation from the airport, they want certain things collecting for them, they want to be paid in a certain way. Some of that stuff's fine. Again, these are the minor quibbles to me. They're not that big a deal. What's interesting is there's this one that says penalising teams and players for not obeying event rules, like causing delays, misbehaving, by cutting off prize money. I agree with that as a concept. I think organisers should do that anyway. But what's funny is the person organising this and suggesting it is Zero Gravity from Na'Vi. And Na'Vi in 1.6, one of the most heinous teams of all time for causing delays, arguing about stuff, refusing to do things in tournaments. So it's just kind of funny that he himself would suggest that. But I think as a general rule to police everyone, it is a good demand to make of organisers that they do this, because obviously, in theory, if you're one team, yes, you don't want your teams to get fucked over and penalised, but you also don't want your team having to play extra hours and getting fucked over by bad decisions by tournament organisers, because other players can get away with this stuff. So it does actually, policing everyone in that sense is a good thing, I think. It's basically tournament standards. There's then the fact that they say stuff like they want to be paid in no later than 3 months after events. That's not unreasonable at all. That should have been the case always. It's only people like ESL who years ago thought it was cool to just like say that they paid within 90 days and then have people go years without getting the money and then be stealing from Peter to pay to Paul and that sort of bullshit, and did it all, and they kept claiming in public they weren't doing it. That's why, in a weird way, a team org there can leverage against what is org mismanagement there. Now then, orgs could all get together and say, well, we are going to pay every 6 months. You see how the counterplay goes on here. Now, likewise, if they're going to do this deal here, team unions, like, we only want it to be, you have to pay within 3 months. That's where the player union should come in and go, right, and in our union, if you're going to, all of the teams have to pay the money to us within 3 months, or within 1 month of receiving it after the 3 months from the tournament organising. You can see how the unions would operate here, and the natural hierarchy of what would be going on. I think in general, there's some reasonable stuff in here. I can definitely understand in terms of self-interest, things that make sense here. Also, as I've kind of outlined, some of the things that seem like negatives, like they're going to shut some tournaments out or force tournaments to have to consolidate and put more prize money into less tournaments. Yes, I know that those sound bad in general, and those are kind of limiting for the scene. But first of all, they're not as extreme as they seem, because teams who aren't in the union can still play those leagues. And secondly, as a spectator, personally, I'm not that interested in the health of some of the smaller orgs. In terms of tournaments, the ones I don't watch anyway, I don't particularly care about, or think have too weak a pool. So in a way, I can sort of be a bit acting my own self-interest, as these players and teams are, and think, right, well, I want to watch less tournaments but with better teams. In a way, that does make sense to a degree. Obviously, I don't want it to go too extreme and be an exclusive one league or an LCS type thing, but there's some play here. It's not as extreme as just because you're doing something in your interest doesn't mean it can never be in someone else's interest. So I think it's an interesting, there's a lot of grey area in this topic. Anyway, if you like to play fantasy esports such as League of Legends, Dota 2, CSGO, lots of tournaments there. League of Legends World Championship currently going on. You can play at alphadraft.com, link in the description box below. And they have all different levels of tournaments, different tiers of tournaments, different types of tournaments. You play 2 people, you play 5 people, you play 10 people, you play 1,000 people, you play huge ones, you play penny ones, you play $1, $5, $10, $100, $1,000. I don't know if that should be $1,000. I'm not a baller like that yet, but maybe I will be if AlphaDraft keep paying me that sick money, pay me.